today, not all banks are supported equally. Hello again, I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to our latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. This post is one for the connoisseurs, as we are delving into the depths of arrangements to help support certain Australian banks via the so-called Committed Liquidity Facility. And by the way, if you value the content we produce, please do consider joining our Patreon program, where you can support our ability to continue to make great content. Here's the link and it's in the comments below. APRA recently published a letter relating to the Committed Liquidity Facility, which is available to just 15 of the banks in Australia, known as the LCR banks. These have the backstop option of calling on funds from the RBA to buttress their liquidity in case of need, so that they can meet their obligations under the Basel III regime. For a fee, these banks essentially have a safety net in times of distress. Now, APRA has outlined the arrangements for next year. Of course, the other lenders have to operate without these supports. This is more evidence of a lack of level playing field in the system and how the regulators are supporting the big end of town. No surprise then that big players are regarded by the market as too big to fail. But as Australian government debt is hurtling beyond $500 billion, I have to say their so-called justification, lack of liquidity in the local securities, mainly Australian government securities and securities issued by the borrowing authorities of the states and territories, is wearing a bit thin. So we ask, why is this facility needed at all? This is what APRA has said. The Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, APRA, is releasing aggregate results on the Committed Liquidity Facility, the CLF, established between the Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, and certain locally incorporated ADIs that are subject to the liquidity coverage ratio. APRA implemented the LCR on the 1st of January 2015. The LCR is a minimum requirement that aims to ensure that ADIs maintain sufficient unencumbered high-quality liquid assets, the HQLA, to survive a severe liquidity stress scenario lasting for 30 calendar days. The LCR is part of the Basel III package of measures to strengthen the global banking system. In December 2010, APRA and the RBA announced that ADIs subject to the LCR will be able to establish a CLF with the RBA. The CLF is intended to be sufficient in size to compensate for the lack of sufficient HQLA, mainly Australian government securities and securities issued by the borrowing authorities of the states and territories, in Australia for ADIs to meet the LCR requirements. ADIs are required to make every reasonable effort to manage their liquidity risk through their own balance sheet management before applying for a CLF for LCR purposes. All locally incorporated LCR ADIs were invited to apply for a CLF amount to take effect on the 1st of January 2019, and all 15 ADIs chose to apply. Following APRA's assessment of the applications, the aggregate Australian dollar net cash outflow, the NCO, of the 15 ADIs was estimated to be approximately $381 billion. The total CLF amount allocated for 2019, including an allowance for buffers over the minimum 100% requirement, is approximately $243 billion. When this arrangement was announced in 2011, the RBA said that the CLF will enable participating ADIs to access a pre-specified amount of liquidity by entering into repurchase agreements of various securities outside the Reserve Bank's normal market operations. To secure the Reserve Bank's commitment, ADIs will be required to pay ongoing fees. The Reserve Bank's commitment is contingent on the ADIs having positive net worth in the opinion of the bank, having consulted with APRA. The facility will be at the discretion of the Reserve Bank. To be eligible for the facility, an ADI must first have received approval from APRA to meet part of its liquidity requirements through this facility. The facility can only be used to meet that part of the liquidity requirement agreed with APRA. APRA may also ask ADIs to confirm as much as 12 months in advance the extent to which they will be relying on a commitment from the bank to meet the LCR requirement. In return for providing commitments under the CLF, the bank will charge a fee of 15 basis points per annum based on the size of the commitment. The fee will apply to both drawn and undrawn commitments and must be paid monthly in advance. The fee may be varied by the bank at its sole discretion, provided it gives 3 months' notice of any change. Securities that ADIs can use under the CLF will include all securities eligible for the Reserve Bank's normal market operations. And in addition, for the purposes of the CLF, the Reserve Bank will allow ADIs to present certain related party assets issued by bankruptcy remote vehicles such as self-securitized residential mortgage-backed securities, RMBS. This reflects a desire from a systemic risk perspective to avoid promoting excessive cross-holdings of bank-issued instruments. Should the ADI lack a sufficient quantity of residential mortgages, other self-securitized assets may be considered with eligibility assessed on a case-by-case basis. The Reserve Bank has discretion to broaden the eligibility criteria and conditions for the various asset classes at any time, and the bank will provide 1 year's notice of any decision to narrow the criteria for the facility. For the CLF, the bank will purchase securities under repo on an interest rate set 25 basis points above the board's target for the cash rate, in line with the current arrangements for the overnight repo facility. The initial margins that the Reserve Bank will apply to eligible collateral will be the same as those used in the bank's normal market operations. Consistent with current practice, each day the bank will revalue all securities held under repurchase agreements at prevailing market prices. Subject to the ADI having positive net worth, the Reserve Bank will give at least 12 months' notice of any intention to terminate the CLF, and the bank's commitment to any individual ADI will lapse if the fee is not paid. Now, we ask again, given the growth in government debt, why is this facility needed at all? And by the way, if you value the content we produce, please do consider joining our Patreon program, where you can support our ability to make great content. And as always, if you like what you've seen here today, please share and like the post and add a comment or question. I read them all. And if you want to join the growing band of subscribers who receive alerts when we release new posts, do subscribe now by hitting the subscribe bell. And if you've already subscribed, many thanks. I really appreciate your support and participation. I'm Martin North, the Principal Analyst from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time.